The history of the United States began far before it became a unified nation. European explorers, particularly from Spain, France and England, began to explore the New World in the late 15th century. Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492 marked the beginning of sustained European presence in the Americas. The first successful English colony was Jamestown, founded in Virginia in 1607. Despite challenges, Jamestown survived and paved the way for further colonization. The Pilgrims arrived in 1620 and established Plymouth Colony in present-day Massachusetts, seeking religious freedom. By the mid-17th century, the English had established 13 colonies along the eastern seaboard. These colonies were diverse in economy, culture and religion, but were united under English rule. Over time, these colonies developed their own identities and customs, setting the stage for future conflicts and the eventual quest for independence. The mid-18th century was a period of growing tension between the American colonies and the British Crown. The end of the 7 Years' War in 1763 left Britain with a massive debt, leading the British government to impose taxes on the colonies. The Stamp Act of 1765, which taxed printed materials, was met with fierce resistance and was eventually repealed due to the colonists' boycott of British goods. Subsequent acts, such as the Townshend Acts of 1767, imposed duties on various imported goods, further inflaming colonial resentment. The colonies began to organize and coordinate their resistance, forming groups like the Sons of Liberty. In 1770, the Boston Massacre occurred, where British soldiers fired into a crowd of colonists, killing 5. Tensions continued to mount, culminating in the Boston Tea Party of 1773, where colonists dumped an entire shipment of tea into Boston Harbor to protest the Tea Act. In response, the British government enacted the Coercive Acts, known as the Intolerable Acts by the colonists, which further restricted colonial autonomy. In 1774, the First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia, bringing together representatives from 12 colonies to coordinate a response, setting the stage for the Declaration of Independence. The American Revolution began in earnest in April 1775 with the battles of Lexington and Concord. The Second Continental Congress convened shortly thereafter, appointing George Washington as the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Despite early setbacks, Washington's leadership and the resilience of the Continental Army kept the revolutionary cause alive. The pivotal moment came on July 4th, 1776, when the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. The war continued for several years, with significant battles such as Saratoga in 1777, which proved to be a turning point. French involvement, following the American victory at Saratoga, provided crucial military and financial support. The war's final major battle occurred at Yorktown in 1781, where British General Cornwallis surrendered to Washington's forces, effectively ending major combat operations. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, officially ended the war and recognized the sovereignty of the United States. The issue of slavery had been a contentious one since the founding of the United States. By the mid-19th century, it had become the central issue dividing the nation. The northern states, where industrialization was taking root, largely opposed the expansion of slavery. In contrast, the southern states' economies depended heavily on slave labor for their agricultural production. The election of Abraham Lincoln as president in 1860 was the final straw for many southern states. Believing that Lincoln intended to abolish slavery, 11 southern states seceded from the Union to form the Confederate States of America. This act of secession precipitated the Civil War, which began in April 1861 with the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Initially, the war aimed to preserve the Union, but it soon became a fight to end slavery. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were free, shifting the war's moral purpose towards abolition. The war dragged on until 1865, when General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, effectively ending the conflict. The 13th Amendment, ratified later that year, abolished slavery throughout the United States. The late 19th century marked a period of rapid industrialization in the United States. Advances in technology and transportation, such as the steam engine and the expansion of the railroad network, facilitated mass production and distribution of goods. Factories sprang up in urban areas, drawing millions of people from rural areas and abroad in search of work. The industrial boom led to significant economic growth, but it also brought about major social changes. The rise of big business and monopolies, exemplified by figures like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, led to enormous wealth for a few and difficult working conditions for many. Labourers, including women and children, often worked long hours in unsafe environments for low wages. This disparity sparked the rise of the labour movement, which fought for workers' rights and better conditions. Urbanisation accompanied industrialization as people flocked to cities in search of employment, leading to overcrowded and unsanitary living conditions. Despite these challenges, cities became cultural and economic hubs, fostering innovation and diversity. The Industrial Revolution laid the foundation for the United States to become a leading industrial power. The United States entered World War I in 1917, joining the Allies against the Central Powers. Several factors, including the sinking of American ships by German submarines and the Zimmermann telegram, pushed the United States into the conflict. The American Expeditionary Forces, led by General John J. Pershing, played a crucial role in the final offensives. Women entered the workforce in large numbers, contributing to the push for women's suffrage. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war, but left unresolved tensions. President Woodrow Wilson advocated for his 14 points, including the creation of the League of Nations. The war led to the Roaring Twenties, a period of economic prosperity and cultural change. The Great Depression was a severe worldwide economic downturn that began in 1929 and lasted through much of the 1930s. President Franklin D. Roosevelt implemented the New Deal to combat the crisis. These programs aimed to provide relief, promote recovery, and reform the financial system. Key programs included the Civilian Conservation Corps and Social Security Act. The New Deal shaped U.S. economic policies and influenced future crises. World War II was a defining moment in the history of the United States and the world. The conflict began in 1939 when Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland, leading Britain and France to declare war. The United States initially remained neutral, but provided material support to the Allies through programs like Lend-Lease. The attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan on December 7, 1941, led the United States to enter the war officially. The United States played a crucial role in both the European and Pacific theaters, participating in significant campaigns such as D-Day and the island hopping strategy in the Pacific. The war effort led to unprecedented levels of industrial production and technological innovation, including the development of the atomic bomb under the Manhattan Project. The end of World War II in 1945 marked the beginning of the United States' emergence as a global superpower. The war had a profound impact on American society, including the integration of women and minorities into the workforce. The GI Bill provided returning veterans with education and housing benefits, contributing to the post-war economic boom and the growth of the American middle class. The Civil Rights Movement was a pivotal period in American history, marked by the struggle for racial equality and social justice. Key figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X played significant roles in advocating for African American rights. Landmark events included the Montgomery bus boycott and the March on Washington, where King delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were landmark legislations that aimed to end segregation and ensure voting rights. The movement led to profound social and cultural changes, challenging the nation to live up to its ideals of freedom and equality. The Cold War was a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, lasting from the end of World War II until the early 1990s, marked by ideological conflict, nuclear arms race, and proxy wars. The US adopted containment to prevent communism, leading to conflicts like the Korean and Vietnam Wars. The space race saw the Soviet launch of Sputnik and the American moon landing. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The Cold War ended with the Soviet Union's dissolution in 1991, marking a victory for the US.